Hello, everybody. We're sure glad you're joining us today for our 10-minute Bible lesson. Well, you know what? We started a new book. We're in the book of Proverbs, and we began that last time. And then today we're going to be looking at Proverbs chapter 3, and we're going to try to cover the first 6 verses. Now, in these first 6 verses, there are 5 pieces of really good advice that Solomon gives us. And also, in these verses, there's a benefit that Solomon tells us about if we will adhere to that advice. So let's go ahead and get started and read verses 1 and 2 and see what he has to say. So that's Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. My son, do not forget my law, but let your heart keep my commands. For length of days and long life and peace they will add to you. Now, who loves us more than our parents? Because in this verse, it's actually Solomon talking to his son. He's giving advice and instructions to his son. Now, maybe Jesus, I guess Jesus definitely loves us more than our parents, but our parents love us so much and they wouldn't do anything to hurt us. In fact, they would love to give us really good instructions. And wouldn't it be great if we could kind of take those instructions? I mean, it would really, really help us. If you could think that the things that they've learned and they could pass those down to us, and then we could pass it down to our children, and then it would be like each generation would just keep getting better and better. Now, there are some things that we do get from our parents, but most of the time we've got our ears closed, and we're just not paying a whole lot of attention. But it would really, really be a good thing and a real worthwhile if we could just do what, the instructions that our parents give us. Now, Solomon mentions a benefit here. Let me read that again. He says, for length of days and long life and peace they will add to you. So think about that. If in other words, if we're to follow the instructions, that there's a benefit from it. And what is that benefit? Length of days, long life, and peace. Now, how valuable would that be if someone had it in their power to offer you a long life and a long and peaceful life? Who could do that? And how much would that be worth? Listen, it would be worth more than all the money we could lay our hands on. Who does that? God does that. And so that would be the benefit. Well, now let's jump on down to the next 2 verses. That would be verses 3 and 4, and read and see what advice Solomon gives more. He says, let not mercy and truth forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. And so find favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man. So in this passage here, Solomon tells us of 2 great virtues. What are those virtues that he mentions here? The virtues are mercy and truth. Now, perhaps you're fortunate enough and you already have in your possession as a part of your life those virtues. Let's just say for a minute that you possess the virtues of mercy and truth. So if you do, Solomon says this, he kind of tells us, don't let them go. In fact, he says, bind them around your neck. Now, maybe you might be a person, that you don't possess those 2 things, those 2 virtues, mercy and truth. So what would you do if you did? Well, you could ask God to give those virtues to you. In fact, Solomon says in this verse, he said, write them on the tablet of your heart. So that's what we need to do, to ask God to do that for us. Now, what exactly is mercy? Have you thought about what it is? If I could just make a little illustration to explain what I think when we show mercy and being merciful, what it means. Okay, have you ever had anybody do something really bad to you unfairly? I mean, most of us have. And let's just say this as a scenario, that later on down the road, an opportunity came where you had it in your power to be able to kind of get back at that person. And it would even be, you could say it would be a right thing because maybe they deserved it. But instead of taking advantage and saying, you know what, I'm going to pay that person back, instead of doing that, you say this, you know what, I think I'll forgive that person. Now that's what mercy is. And all of us need mercy. In fact, when we show mercy to other people, God shows mercy to us. Now the other virtue is truth. And how valuable is truth? Listen, it's becoming, in our culture, a really rare commodity. We need to be a truthful person, an honest person, someone who doesn't deal in falsehoods and deceit. And so Solomon says here that if we will do that, there's a benefit. And the benefit is that we will receive a high esteem. We'll receive favor and high esteem both in the sight of God and in the sight of man. Now, let's look at the last three pieces of advice that Solomon gives us. And this is in verses 5 and 6. Now, these two verses are some of my favorite. I know I've got a lot of favorite verses, right? But these are two of my favorite verses. Let's read them. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. So what is he saying here? First thing he's saying, the piece of advice he's given us is to trust in the Lord with all of our heart. And I think if you think about trusting, when you trust in somebody, they have to be trustworthy. And that's really a valuable thing, too, to find somebody that's trustworthy. I mean, let's say you want to have somebody work on your car, and you have a mechanic. You say, hey, listen, that mechanic is trustworthy. Or maybe someone is going to work on your heat and air in your house, and you've got somebody that you can really rely on. You know they're not going to cheat you. You know they're going to be fair. They're trustworthy. Well, let me just say this. God is trustworthy. And there's no one anywhere that's more trustworthy than God. And so here's what I say about that. How come it's so hard for us to trust him? Have you ever thought about that? It's really hard. I think it's not an easy thing to trust God. I think what happens is why that's so hard is because when we do that, we kind of have to give up some control. And we hate to do that. It kind of makes us in some ways vulnerable, and we just kind of take it out of our hands and put it in his hands. But we should do that. In fact, Solomon, his advice is he says to trust in the Lord with all your heart. Wouldn't that be a great thing to do? We need to do that. And not only do we need to do that, but it would be even a good idea if we could not depend or have so much confidence in our own ability and in our own understanding. We ought to be a little bit skeptical of our own self and our own powers. But listen, when we trust in the Lord and we commit things into his hands, things always turn out right. And I'm sure that you've had that happen to you when you've trusted in the Lord and then you have seen the outcome and that the outcome was really, really well. Now, what does Solomon say when the outcome is really well? He says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not into your own understanding. And then he says, in all your ways acknowledge him. What does that mean? It just means simply this: when good things happen to us, when things work out really well, let's be really careful to acknowledge him. Let's acknowledge the one that made it happen. And that's the advice that Solomon gives us. He wants us to give God the credit for it. And when we do, we feel really good about it. Plus, we're following some really, really good advice. Now, what happens when we do all of that? Well, here's the benefit from it. The scripture says this, that he will direct our paths. I don't know about you. We can't see the future. I can't see the future. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's down the road, but I know who does know what's down the road, and that is God. And so when we trust in the Lord with all of our hearts, and we don't lean to our own confidence, and we acknowledge him, that he'll direct our paths. Isn't that great advice? Hey, listen, we've taken that advice from probably the smartest man who ever lived. Who was that? That was Solomon. So I hope that's been beneficial for you today, or interesting at least to you, and instructive for you, and if we could just apply it. And so I pray that we might be able to do that. Hey, listen, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you have a great week, and join us next time.